Louise Dickmeyer is somebody who we've known in the community for a long time. It's fairly recently that she has become the Chief Executive Officer, is that the right? Of the Children's Museum of Southern Minnesota. But that is an organization that we have watched from an inkling of an idea, and it's become one of the top children's museums in the region. I think in Minnesota, it's only behind, is it the St. Paul or the Minneapolis Children's Theater?
The Children's Museum, yep.
The Children's Museum. So we've got a great resource right here. And she did speak about the power of play at a Kiwanis meeting, it seems months ago now. And I thought it was a topic that would be of interest to our folks. So I will step aside now and introduce Louise Dickmeyer from the Children's Museum of Southern Minnesota.
All right. Well, I'm thrilled to be here with you, and thank you for taking the time this afternoon. I don't think we're going to take our hour and a half that I think this was originally scheduled, but look forward to sharing some thoughts, and then we can certainly have exchange about this topic around the power of play, as well as just the state of affairs in general, maybe around the museum. I'll fill you in a little bit on where things stand. As you can imagine, it's a pretty challenging time right now for all cultural organizations, and for all organizations like Vine, with all of the constraints that we're all experiencing. So, and yes, this is sort of serendipitous that we're talking about a topic that is very important to the future of our children at exactly the same time. Governor Walz is talking about what's going to happen with our kiddos. So I have an 8-year-old granddaughter and a 5-year-old grandson. The grandson will start kindergarten this year, and my granddaughter's going into 3rd grade. They're both going into a new school because they moved over the summer. And so just a lot of uncertainty, and just sort of adds to the stressors of the families. But we wish everyone well. I love seeing all the books. I'm an English major, so I love books. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into my PowerPoint here, if this works, and I will get her started. So again, appreciate the opportunity. Hopefully you can all hear me okay, and I just messed it up. Start this again. Here we go. So I will not touch my mouse again. So again, we talk a lot about the power of play at the Children's Museum. We're very focused on play, and know that play is absolutely crucial to the learning and development of children. And so we're going to talk a little bit about sort of where we've come from and where we are presently, and why things are where they are in terms of how children these days play, or in many cases they don't play like they used to, that's for sure. So our mission actually speaks to and weaves in this concept around the power of play by igniting that natural curiosity of every child through the power of play in a dynamic, awe-inspiring environment. Don't know if you've ever been in the museum. I suspect you have. And if you haven't and you would like to stop down, you just let me know. I've got my contact information at the end of the presentation, and Mike knows how to get a hold of me as well. So would be happy to walk people through. I can tell you right now, it's not as happy a place as it is normally, without those little kids and the laughter and the happy voices. So we have a great mission. I've worked with nonprofit organizations throughout, a good chunk of my career. My master's degree is in nonprofit management, and I love being able to serve this kind of a powerful mission. I thought I would just sort of create a little backdrop here around the impact of children's museums. The Association of Children's Museums did an economic impact study in, I believe, like 2012. And for our nation at that time, there was about $5.5 billion contributed to the economy through the operations of children's museums, which have really expanded over the last 30 years pretty significantly. $2 billion in salaries were generated, over 57,000 jobs held by people in children's museums, and 41% of those jobs really were outside of the children's museums, in industries that were related in one way, shape, or form. What's particularly poignant about this set of facts right now is that there is going to be a significant amount of contraction amongst many cultural organizations. And in fact, just yesterday I learned that the Eau Claire Children's Museum had reopened in July, and they have now closed, and they're closed indefinitely. They were just losing too much money. People weren't ready to come back to museums. So there's very much a changing face for children's museums in the nation. And I think ours will be fine. We're a very strong institution and have wonderful support. So that's just a little bit about the U.S. environment. The Children's Museum of Southern Minnesota, just a little bit more about our organization specifically. We've attracted visitors from every state in the nation except for Rhode Island, not sure why, as well as a number of different countries. And I believe we have Australia now as well. You can see this is our upper Midwest. This is a heat map showing our visitorship. In 2019, we attracted and hosted visitors from 75 of the 87 Minnesota counties. So we have a great array of folks who come in on a pretty regular basis. We've even got members in Chaska who drive down weekly because it's easier for them to get to Mankato and play than it is to drive into downtown St. Paul. So we do enjoy a great deal of support. Just very quickly, this is a concentration of 12 counties that surround Blue Earth and Nicollet County. That's the major concentration of our donors as well as our members. So again, a really great reach for the Children's Museum. We are really proud of the work that we do in access programs for families facing barriers. So again, in our mission is to serve every child. And so families that are facing barriers, whether they're economic or language or cultural barriers or active duty military, special needs, we have programs to accommodate those families and to allow them an opportunity to come in and play. We have just shy of 700 families last year who came in our Gateway to Play membership, which is a free membership that is given to families when they can't afford that $108 annual amount. And this heat map is actually of our school group. So we have in the past hosted 8,000 to 9,000 school kids, grades 2nd and 3rd, from around southern Minnesota up into the south of the Twin Cities area and into northern Iowa, including Cedar Rapids. And they have come on site to the museum to engage in STEM activities, science, technology, engineering, math. Unfortunately, again, in our new normal, we won't be able to host field trips. No field trips are allowed this year, but we hope to be able to take some programming out to the schools. I just want to mention that, again, our Children's Museum, like all children's museums, are focused on early childhood education. And in our case, we are guided by this document, the Learning Experience Master Plan. It's about an 80-page document that dictates how our exhibits are put together and what are the facets that need to be present in order to create a rich learning environment for our children. And I like to say, I spent 10 years in economic development in the Mankato, North Mankato region, and I like to think of the museum as one of the earliest entrees of our kids into workforce development, because through play, they are perfecting their communication skills, critical thinking, their problem solving, they're working as a team, they're learning to collaborate and such. So again, very rich learning environment in the Children's Museum. So we're here to talk about play, and this quote is great in that play is so much a part of our lives as human beings that we oftentimes fail to reflect on the range of our play activities and what those activities mean for us. So like playing in that memoirs group at Spring Lake Park, that's playing, that's being with friends, engaging in interesting conversation, might be playing cards or gardening or bird watching. We're playing when we're doing those things as adults, as well as any number of other things. I've listed just a few here. Now I'm old enough when we had you know, when it was summer, you got up in the morning, you got dressed, and you got on your bike and off you went. And really all your parents told you was to be home in time for supper. Or maybe if you lived in a small community, you know, be home for that noon whistle or home for that 6 p.m. whistle. So I should think you can share in that, in those memories of this is how we played. We were outdoors. We were able to kind of follow our own noses. Our parents didn't necessarily know where we were. I grew up a block down from where Lincoln Community Center is right now, and we used to bike out to Minneopa Falls. I don't think my mom or dad ever knew that we were doing that. We would bike out to the lake. We were, you know, we were carefree to a degree. We were careful, and we were learning lots of things as we were playing freely. So in today's day and age, and kind of what we're talking about today is the impacts that have reduced playtime significantly. And I'll go into depth a little bit more around, you know, the activities, gaming, focus on testing, some of these other impacts. So in terms of kiddos these days, as you may very well be aware, I certainly witness it with my own grandchildren. Their schedules are pretty packed. They are scheduled pretty tight, not a lot of loose time. Some kids are really overscheduled and just have everything prescribed for them, which doesn't leave them a lot of time for free and self-directed play. I added this table just as an illustration because there's a survey that indicated that 26% of US parents believe or hope that their child becomes a pro athlete. 26% of our parents in the United States believe this. And this table shows the number of high school students and the percentage of that population that actually play the same sport in college. And then that last column on the right shows the percentage of the ones that play in college actually go on to the pros. Now, if you do the math on those things, it's infinitesimal in terms of the you know, chances that your child's going to play in pro sports. But again, over 1 in 4 parents believes or hopes that their child will be a pro athlete. So that's one impact on why kids maybe get slotted into being overscheduled. There are a lot of reasons. And I think that, parents are feeling pressured to have their kids in lots of things and to keep them at the top of their game, help them excel in school or in a sport or whatever it might be. So it is a reality that I don't think is going away anytime soon. Gaming is another huge impact on the reduction in our children's time to just engage again in free play where it's self-directed and self-guided. This shows from ages 2 on up the number of minutes and in some cases hours that kids play video games alone. Pretty staggering. And of course we've probably witnessed this. I certainly have in my family. There's a heightened focus on education and testing, academics and testing. These particular statistics go as far back as 1989, when schools used to have at least one recess period during their school day. And then 10 years later, 70% of kindergarten classes maybe had a recess period. And now since that, in 2001, when No Child Left Behind came to be, there became an even stronger focus on academics, on testing, achievement scores and such. So that heightened focus on the achievement scores and such has again taken play out of our schools. And I'm going to speak a little bit later about a person who is a huge advocate for changing that tide. Overprotective parenting. There's a lot of parents that are, you hear about helicopter parents. Parents these days are not as willing to let their kids take risks. And it's a detriment to our children to be overprotected and not be able to skin their knee or fall off their bike or climb a tree and try to figure out how to get back down. There's a lot of research out there around the fact that parents are overprotective, and that can be detrimental to children. I regret having to, it's heartbreaking to even look at these little guys. As we all know, Jacob Wetterling was, you know, abducted, and the little boy on the right is Adam Walsh, who in the early 80s was abducted as well. And these are two examples of that just absolutely strike fear in the hearts of parents. Certainly did with me. We started our family in 1980, and these incidents where children disappeared like that had a significant psychological effect. Even though, again, the chances of that happening is not significant, but you can't forget that and that impact. So that's another impact on why playtime just isn't free, to be able to roam around your neighborhood and such. Again, technology, in addition to just gaming, you know, on the phones, on TV, on the consoles, you've got tablets, 6.5 hours a day kids are spending in front of screens. And the statistics at the bottom there are, again, talking about the impacts on more time addressed at school work, and in this case, there was a lot more time spent shopping with parents. I don't know if that's still the statistic that'll stand nowadays with Amazon and such, but again, kids just don't have time to be out and play. In some cases, it's play is reduced because of poor urban design. There aren't decent parks for kids to play in. I would challenge you as you drive around the region to take a look at parks and just be really deliberate and look at whether there's anybody there or not. And unfortunately, you don't see many children playing in parks. And parks have been over the last 50 years, parks have been redeveloped to be safer, quote unquote. So like the high swings and the metal ladders and the monkey bars and all of that metal stuff is gone. And they've created, you know, rubber mats and wood chips and all sorts of things to try to keep kids safe. Another impact, obviously, is unsafe neighborhoods, which obviously that is something that needs to be, you can't just let a child roam in a neighborhood where there's high degrees of violence and such. The picture that I included on this slide is actually from World War II. And the reason I put it there is because this gave rise to what is called adventure playgrounds. And I'll talk about that here in a moment. But there's a lot of research on the backside of the World War II and the Blitzkrieg in particular in London, and how children began to play in the rubble. And that it actually helped them to cope with what was happening in the war and their homes and their families and everything around them. There's scads of pictures about how they played, the World War II kids played in London, and it actually helped to create a bit more of a positive outcome, excuse me. So some of the things that research is starting to prove and kids are presenting based on the fact that they are not playing as much as they once did, and playing, you know, like we did, running around outside all summer, not just sitting in front of a TV, that definitely are showing decreased core strength, and then that results in poor posture. Their stamina has decreased, and they're more susceptible to fractures because, again, they're not building that core and that bone strength. Trouble with spatial awareness. There's a book called Balanced and Barefoot, and it talks about the impact of nature-based play, being outside and playing, and what a huge impact that has on children. One of the outcomes of that being restricted is that kids don't get a sense of spatial awareness. So when you're outdoors, you know, you're hearing things differently, and you're hearing things at a distance, or you're catching scents, and you're just seeing things in a much broader perspective. There are actually schools that have banned playing tag because kids were hitting too hard. And what they found was that it wasn't that the kids were trying to be mean or malicious by smacking the other child hard. their spatial awareness was so far off that they were hitting, and they were actually hitting, you know, again, harder than they should have. These last couple of statistics, the number of sit-ups a 10-year-old could do declined by 27% in 10 years from 98 to 2008. I'm not quite sure where it is now. Arm strength fell by 26% and grip strength by 7% in that same period. So definitely getting weaker and weaker, which of course isn't going to help anybody. But the benefits to play is that it does allow kids, obviously, to develop that connection, and it is their self-identified and self-guided interests that they get to focus on and create that connection. Play is one of the first places where kids learn how to make decisions and solve their problems and exert self-control and follow rules. Not necessarily rules that adults put in place, rules that maybe kids established amongst a play group. They learn to handle their emotions, fear, anger. We have a 2.5-story climbing structure in the Mankato Clinic Tree of Forts in the museum. And we have kids, little kids, who will get up in that top fort and have to find their way back down. And we've witnessed, you know, the fear when they have to try to figure this out. But when they do, it's such a gratifying experience for them. So again, play is so incredibly powerful. You know, children make friends, they learn to get along, they learn to be equals, and then of course, finally, play is a wonderful source of happiness. We all feel happy, right, when we get to play? So today, you know, again, our museum is really focused on free play. So when kiddos come in, we really encourage that they get to just follow their own nose and play. And it's a safe place, it's all fenced in. A parent is always a parent or a guardian, or they're accompanied by an adult. No adult is allowed in the museum if not accompanied by a child, which is a great policy and obviously makes a lot of sense. We are doing more to focus on nature-based play. So this is an example. This is out in our water area, in our farmyard, in our courtyard off to the side of the museum. We're going to be expanding a nature-based play area and bringing out some new structures, but they're going to be able to be used in a very flexible way. One is a mud kitchen. One is a shed that's just full of, you know, bark and branches and leaves and acorns and all sorts of loose parts that will allow kids to just use their imagination. And then if you Google adventure playgrounds, you'll see there's even I didn't include this video, but there's a really great video on adventure playgrounds, and you will see in these areas. So they're very popular in Europe, and there are some in the United States as well, but they're fenced areas and they are supervised by adults, but parents aren't allowed in there. And it's not for little ones, it's for a little bit older kiddos. You might see fire, you might see sharp objects, you might see rocks, or like a tin shed, things that have sharp edges, and kids just get to create and play and create their own adventure. So that's sort of play on steroids and incredibly stimulating. Now, one of the things that the Children's Museum Southern Minnesota is doing is we just actually on Tuesday convened for the first time our Power Play Committee. So we have Dr. Heather Von Bank, who's a play expert. She's a chair of the Family and Consumer Science Department at MSU. Kim Cleven, who's an early childhood educator in Lake Crystal and the chair of our board. Jen Faust, who's in industry with Ike Bailey, and Dr. Kendra Finn from the Mankato Clinic. She's a family doc, and also Rachel Compart, who's an early childhood educator at Little Bees School. We want to create an initiative in our region to really make play a regional asset. Make this such a cool place to live and have that focus on play made the power of play made really top of mind to everybody in the region. There are communities that have, like at their bus stops, chimes or drum sets that you can play while you're waiting for the bus, and you can infuse play into different parts of your community to just remind people of the power of play and learning. We'll make that a regional effort, and hopefully, again, make play a regional asset. Katie Smith is who I wanted to mention. She was the Minnesota Teacher of the Year in 2011, recognized by President Obama. She is an early childhood educator, which was exciting at the time when she received this honor. And she is leading the charge to restore play as a primary focus in our schools. And she came to Mankato in January and presented at the museum to a group of us. And that's when the museum took a hold of this Power of Play initiative. And now we're got a little sidetracked, as you can imagine. But we're going to start putting that stake in the ground and move things forward, hopefully. So why does all this matter? As I mentioned earlier, you know, kids today are our leaders and our innovators and, you know, our future. And to that point, I'll just share this quick little video with you.
When I grow up, I think I'm gonna be maybe I'll be a dentist. I'm a future doctor. I'm your future engineer. I'm your future teacher. I'm your future entrepreneur. I'm your future veterinarian. I'm your future author. I'm your future artist. I'm your future banker.
I'm your future paleontologist.
I'm your future... I don't know. You wanna play? Wanna play? You wanna play? You wanna play? I know you wanna play. It's time to go play.
I love it. So there we are. We have a lot of work to do. I'm certainly in a wonderful place. I always tell people I have the best job in the world. And the museum has made a great contribution to kids' lives and their ability to play for those who've been able to come there as visitors or members. And we hope to be able to do a lot more good in the future. And again, just really appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all today. So I'll leave it there and happy to answer any questions or anything.
And please unmute yourself. I did mute everybody while we went into the presentation. But I can start because I had this realization, which I've had several times over the years. But when I was a kid, we had a neighborhood. We knew where all the kids were. We knew if their families went on vacations at certain times because we had our ball games. And when we picked the teams, we knew who needed a little special help. You know, the young kids needed to roll the ball rather than toss it for pitching. And I just don't see that anymore. I go past parks, and if there's something happening, like you said, it's a structured gang getting together to play a game.
Right. It froze up for just a second there, Mike, but it is true. And I think that, again, some of those impacts or a combination of those impacts around, you know, that focus on schooling or the stranger piece or just neighborhoods that people just aren't, I mean, you've got a huge majority of the families that have both parents working or a single parent family. And there's just a lot of impacts that prevent that from happening. So we have to, as a region and as a world, you know, find ways to be able to shake that loose again. But it's definitely been, and I think just this awareness of how important play actually is one place to start. But you're absolutely right. You don't see it very often.
My son worked in a creative environment, and they had a ping pong table in their office.
Oh.
And it stimulated, I mean, when is it that we haven't tried to solve a problem that we step away and do something else and come back to it enlightened, right? Yeah. So I wish that potential employers would seek that for education, to say we need this playful component in our future employees, maybe.
That's exactly right. And kudos to the employers who have managed to weave in fun and play into their work days. So some of the more cutting edge companies, you get to bring your dog to work, or you've got a foosball table or a pool table or ping pong or whatever. And yeah, you step away from your desk, you go blow off some steam, you play a little bit, get your mind working. There's a lot of things that fetter that approach to work in our US traditional offices and manufacturers and such. But I think there's ways that it can definitely begin to loosen up. And again, just an awareness of there's physical, emotional, and mental health impacts on not engaging in enough play. And so that's our goal, to start getting people to think differently about it. So that's awesome.
Have you had a chance to start formulating any general ideas for how you're going to get that done?
Well, we do, we have, so there's some really great models out there. The Boston Children's Museum has a lot of resources on their website, and we will begin to build out a space in our website to have resources to be able to push out. But we want it to go well beyond just, some digital artifacts. We want, like I mentioned, the creating spaces in our community where it's really obvious that this is something that you play with. Maybe you're just waiting across the street, or maybe it's a place where people come together that have walked into a restaurant or something, and something that multiple people play with, and making it okay to do that. I mean, I think we're certainly, us Minnesotans, we're a little bit more reserved and buttoned up in one sense. And I think, so there's some things that we can do that are really overt and kind of out there and are super playful. There's other things that are more research-based, resource-based. We want to be able, we partner with the Mayo Clinic Health System as well as Mankato Clinic, and we even, their doctors will make what they call quote unquote a prescription for play. And that's actually pretty prevalent around a lot of pediatricians, in that in some of the things that challenge families, it's as simple as just go play together, and put your phone down, for goodness sakes. I certainly witnessed that with my kids and their children, my grandchildren. It's just, we're also wired to be attached to those darn devices. And so there's lots of different things that we can do. And we just need to really raise the awareness. And I'm sure there's lots we'll do with the museum too, when we're able to begin to bring folks back together. Any other thoughts or questions? I can tell you. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, I've always got questions. I'm a former newspaper reporter. So
Go for it.
one of the great things that I noticed, one of the few good things that came out when the pandemic hit and everybody had to be home, but they were home together. And I started to notice families going out on the trail in West Mankato, where I had never seen them as an individual before. Now they are out as families, and they were doing a lot more of that. I've seen more sunset and sunrise photos on Facebook, because I think people are starting to get aware of the things that they've been overlooking all that time when they were so busy. And if they just take the time to stop and look.
I would agree, and anecdotally, I witnessed the same thing. So we live out on a lake by the town of Madison Lake. So even driving into Mankato on a regular basis to the museum or wherever, I saw a lot more people out walking, and I saw people out walking as families. There's been more outdoor play. I just saw a headline yesterday that said boat sales are way up this summer in our area. And so people are out boating. They're on the lake that we're on, Duck Lake, and the park is packed with families. I think, as horrible as this pandemic has been, that is a bit of a silver lining, in that, well, number one, families were forced to be together with the shelter in place and schooling. But then, you know, the only thing you could do safely is get outside of your house. In fact, when we reopen, we're having to do a lot of things to, you know, as a loose parts, free play environment. There are a lot of things we're going to have to do that will constrain the play experience to a degree, but we need to do that to keep our families and kids safe and our staff. But we want to do more to expand our outdoor areas and give children and families opportunities to do things maybe longer into, or hopefully year round, out in our wonderful courtyard and farmyard and Dotson Back 40. We've got some space. We've been brainstorming around what that might look like. And yeah, so I think, you know, that's a bit of a silver lining and kind of help people to remember what it felt like to play. And I think camping is being, you know, people are camping more readily now. And yeah, it's a really good point.
Do you have any idea how long it'll be before you'll be able to open?
Yeah, so actually in April, we made a very deliberate decision to open October 1st. So we picked 6 months out. At that time, so in March, we closed the museum before the governor mandated the close of all cultural institutions and others, just by a couple of days, but we wanted to, you know, be careful with our families and our staff and such. And then it just became apparent in April that there was too much uncertainty and it was very hard to plan. So as a team, we determined that we did not think the governor was going to open cultural organizations as soon as he did in June. And our sense was that if we weren't able to open by July, opening in August didn't make sense because we knew there'd be a lot of uncertainty with schools, and September is historically our slowest month, and that's the case with every children's museum as people get back into school. So we chose October 1, and there are a lot of other museums that have already opened and in some cases closed again. I think it's a safe bet. I think it was a good decision for us, and it certainly helped our staff because then we had a staff of 40 people and everybody's furloughed now with the exception of me. And it gave them the summer and it gave them some time to just breathe and just kind of step back and sort of rethink what is our new operation going to look like? Because we're not going to be able ever to go back to what we were, I suspect, until there is a vaccine. But yeah, so October 1, unless, you know, and we also hoped that the October 1st date might allow us time for that. If there was a resurgence of the virus, that we would get sort of past that second phase. And if we're not, and there's reason to you know, be doubtful about our ability to be somewhat successful, there's some really dire percentages that we're hearing from other children's museums. So I participate in these Zoom sessions with the Minnesota cultural organizations, you know, Guthrie, Walker, Minnesota Children's Museum, Science Museum. I participate in another group with Central US museums and then the national museums. And the ones that have opened are only seeing, you know, 15 to maybe 30% of their visitors based on what was typical for years past. You can't maintain an operation like that. So we watch very closely. There's a lot of research around what's called intent to visit. And consumers are declaring, and they break it down based on region. Consumers are declaring their willingness to come back and engage with different kinds of cultural organizations. Zoos and aquariums that are outdoors have higher percentages of intent to visit, and we're sort of in the middle for children's museums. And the lowest percentage of people are willing to visit over the next like 1 to 3 months, 3 to 6, or 6 to 9 months is movie theaters. So again, it just has to do with people's comfort. And we are at children's museums. Our kids our core group is 0 to 9 years old. And I think it'll just depend on people's and parents' level of comfort to come out, and we'll have a lot of protections, and we'll be requiring masks, and we'll have a lot of sanitizing, and we have a lot to do to get ready. But we have a lot of plans already in place, and really need to get back at it. Based on our last, we opened in 2015. Between the period of March 15th to October 1, we're forfeiting about $250,000 in earned revenue. So we have a lot of catching up to do, and it'll take time, and we'll get there by doing some things differently. So long answer.
No, good.
October 1. Yeah.
Anybody else? Questions? How many of you have, oh, sorry, Deb, go ahead.
I had the wonderful opportunity to volunteer there for a few years, a little chunk of time every week. And I marvel at how children solve their own problems by continuous play. And especially the one whose parents just sit back and watch. And how parents lose their feeling that they can't play and join in. Those were two of my most delightful things.
Yep, that's true. That it is better if the parents just let the kids play, but then there is, play becomes enriched by parents' interaction with their children at the appropriate times. Not just telling the kids exactly what to be doing, but when the child wants that interaction to be there and be present and not staring at your phone, that's absolutely ideal. And yeah, we've had a great group of volunteers over time, and appreciate your service in doing that. It'll be a little while before we're going to be able to bring people back to do that, but it's a mighty fun place to volunteer, no doubt about that. So I think Margaret, you had a question?
Yeah, it's just amazing how times have changed, because 7 years or so when we were kids on the farm, we did a lot of creative things. We took egg cartons, big egg cartons, the cases that we took the eggs to market with, and we made a car out of it. It had a steering wheel made out of the top of a coffee can, which had sharp edges, but I don't think we ever got cut. And it had a back seat and a front seat because it had two seats in it, or two sets in it. We didn't have any chairs in it or anything, but we sat in that car and went all over the country. And then my dad put a set of pipes. He put 3 pipes and made kind of a U-shaped frame, and that was our trapeze. And it was just about high enough that we could reach up to it and pull ourselves up on it and swing from our knees and things like that. There were all kinds of things. And of course, on the farm, there were lots of places to go and things to do. And Mother wasn't really worried about what was going to happen to us because nothing seemed to. And then when I raised my kids 50, almost 60 years ago, the kids could go around the neighborhood, and I really didn't know where they were, but I wasn't worried about it. There was a neighborhood full of kids, and they'd all go over to the Calvary Cemetery area and down the ravines to Turtle Lot Park, and they could go by themselves without any problem at all. I don't think parents can let their kids do that now, and it's really a shame. And they were creative too. They built a fort on a vacant lot. And it was really funny because one of the neighbor men was in construction. And so he sort of checked it out to see if it was secure, because it was a 2-story fort. And they had so much fun with it. And then when that lot got sold, they had to clear that away. And so we took our garbage cans and they put this fort in the garbage cans, and we left it there for the next garbage pickup. And the garbage men wouldn't pick it up because it wasn't a tax-paying lot. And so our neighbors all went over there while the garbage man was still there and said, we'll haul the stuff to our own lots and then you can pick it up if you won't pick it up here. So they picked it up.
Oh, I love those stories. And talking about nature-based play, I would bet, so one of the great questions to ask people is, what is your favorite play memory? And this is one of the things that we're going to do with our Power Play campaign. We were just talking about how do we engage like business leaders around the power of play. And one of our committee members said, get them to tell you their best, sort of like StoryCorps, those stories. You know, have them share their best play experience. And I would bet the huge majority of people would say they were outdoors. It was an outdoors memory that we have that was our best play experience. And yeah, Margaret, what you just shared is so typical, and it's really too bad that and we'll get there. Letting if we're all more cognizant of watching kids and knowing that others are watching kids, we'll get a little bit more comfortable with letting the kiddos roam a little bit more. So that's very typical, though.
And seeing how we became adults, and most of us are really quite creative, and then our children too are quite creative in what they do because of those play experiences that they had and that we had.
You're absolutely correct, and that is being shown in research that the degree of creativity and innovation and the ability to innovate has definitely declined. And again, if you think about that in terms of the impacts on our global competitiveness, we need to amp that up as much as we possibly can. And creativity peaks at about age 5. Mm-hmm. So if you don't really build on that, then you've missed an opportunity. And that's part of the pitch for bringing your kids to the museum, is to give them an opportunity to be really creative and let them go around, do things for themselves. And yeah.
Well, the other thing that's developed is productivity, because when you have to figure something out for yourself and learn how to do that, you can apply it to a lot of things in your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Those are those basic skills that we need to equip our children with, and they're not getting ample time to do it in school. They're not getting time to do it based on family constraints and on just the nature of the environment, as well as society. So we got a lot of work to do. And again, Katie Smith is a great advocate. She's banging the drum at the state legislature. She wants Minnesota to be the first state to mandate play as a part of our academics and our curriculum, and bring it back in a really firm, not structured, but in an official kind of a capacity again. Make sure that that's restored, and I'm all for it. I think Minnesota's a great place to do that, and a great place to start. So we want to be that beacon for her in this region, and if anyone is interested in joining in on that fight and or know of someone, just make sure to get a hold of me. We'd welcome it. So this has been great fun. Thank you for the opportunity to spend some time this afternoon.
Well, we certainly appreciate your being here, Lou. It's a great eye opener, because it's one of those things that kind of you don't think about necessarily until the subject comes up, and then all these things pop into your head and you realize it's a true situation. Yep.
Kim Cleven, who's our board chair and the early childhood educator at Lake Crystal, and I actually, we had a number of groups we were going to present to on this, and I think this will continue to be part of what we do with our Power Play campaign, is to be able to reach people. And Renita, thanks. There's lots of kiddos waiting for that museum to open again, that's for sure. So yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm glad it was well received, and I look forward to being able to do this in other venues as well. So thanks again.
And we will be having this available, posted on our website. So if anybody who saw this would like to share the information with somebody else, just point them to the Virtual Vine page. If you've seen that, you know that we post our past presentations on there, and we hope that people will use it as a resource for those who aren't able to make the live presentation. So once again, one more chance to ask a question. And if not, I will thank you all once again for coming. And Lou, I hope we hear the excited screams of young children soon as the Children's Museum opens up again.
Me too. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.